The harsh truth about solo queue and Dead by Daylight is that it's always been a mess, and it always will be. There's no perfect fix for it, and you're only as good as your weakest teammate. And maybe that weakest teammate is yourself sometimes, you never know. And truthfully speaking, solo queue permanently being a mess is what keeps things interesting for everyone. Unpredictable events or decisions that can lead to either good, bad, or simply entertaining outcomes in a match is what keeps every match unique and feeling special in some way. So you can rest assured that even if solo queue is somehow miraculously overbuffed to the millionth degree at some point down the line, there will always be some sort of mess that ends up happening in solo queue, regardless of any buffs you give to survivors. A perfect example of a solo queue buff that happened in recent years for Dead by Daylight is the in-game HUD. The in-game HUD was never detailed like it is today. In the past, you had no idea if your teammates were working on gens, or cleansing a totem, or healing, or doing anything basically productive. But now it shows you not only if someone's working on something productive like a generator, but also the amount of progress that that survivor has done. This change was a very welcome buff to the solo queue experience because now you could kind of coordinate if someone was going to go for the save or if you had to finish a gen and you could focus on that instead. Because back in the day, you really had to just assume if someone's going to go for a save or not. And you had to kind of crunch the numbers in your head and do some quick math and say, okay, if I get to the halfway mark on this gen and no one has saved the person on hook, I'm going to go run to the hook and try and save them. You really had nothing. You were left in the dark, assuming that if no one was going for the save, then something must be going on, or everyone's too focused doing generators or something. But even though the harsh truth about solo queue is that it really can't be fixed, it is still fixable to a certain extent. There's definitely a lot of quality of life features that have yet to be tried or fully implemented. And because this video is being released on the run up to Christmas and every other holiday this time of year, I thought I'd share my own personal wish list for what I would like to see be implemented to help try and fix solo queue. Ultimately, I'm just trying to keep this wish list as realistic as possible and trying to consider all available options for ideas to try and help fix solo queue. But without further ado, number one, which is probably the most obvious change, is making perks and items for each survivor now visible to all survivors. I will note that this is very likely planned for the first half of 2026 based on previous communications from the developers, so I am definitely expecting this to be implemented at some point in the near future. Number two, making it easier to see when a survivor's hook timer or bleed out timer is paused, and also making it much more clear on when the anti-camp meter is filled all the way when a survivor is hooked. Sometimes it truly is difficult to discern if a timer is paused according to what the HUD is trying to show you. And recently, with the addition of the anti-camp meter to the HUD, it's come to my attention that some players are having trouble telling the difference between a fully maxed out anti-camp meter and an anti-camp meter that is almost full, but not quite. So making all of these status effects much easier to read and understand at a quick glance would really go a long way when trying to make decisions in the moment. Number three, having solo queue survivors spawn separate and having swift survivors spawn together. Now recently there was a change made to the way the survivor spawn logic works. So for the longest time, survivors used to spawn separately. So you'd have people split up on gens, possibly across the map. It just kind of depended on the RNG and where everything spawned. And then I believe around the spring trap patch, there was a change made to the spawn logic. So now that survivors always spawn together, or at least they should. I know there's been some bugs with how the spawn logic has worked. And obviously there are still offerings that exist that can change the spawn logic entirely. My idea with this is that it gives a subtle way for solo queue survivors to get a much needed boost in efficiency at the beginning of a match. And then also this can all just be explained with the lore. Survivors who group up together before entering a lobby are placed together in a trial by the entity. So for anybody who's worried about the lore this might impact, that can also be used to justify it. Number four, better matchmaking, or in other words, MMR, leading to better teammates. Now, obviously, this is much easier said than done, but I strongly believe that having higher quality teammates would go a long way in the overall quality of a match. In addition to this, if the one downside to having a higher quality matchmaking system is that the queues take a little bit longer, I am totally fine with that. I personally would prefer to have a higher quality match than a bunch of short, quick matches where I didn't have much of a chance because I felt like my teammates were really not that good. And I should also note that the devs did recently mention making more improvements to the MMR system. And I know it's probably something they are always making changes to, but really, this is something that I think has been a growing problem for a little bit. So, any real long standing changes that they can make that would improve the quality of matches would be a great thing to see. And finally, one last wish list item for solo queue quality of life, and I fully admit that this might be a controversial ask or request, but I'm gonna put it out there in the universe anyways. Allow solo queue survivors the option to select up to 3 killers that they can mark as prefer to not play against. Now, the reason why I believe this would be a nice quality of life feature is that there are really just some killers that can make solo queue an absolute nightmare. Killers like twins, for example, are notorious for being an absolute nightmare if you don't have any way to coordinate or communicate what's going on, and this is especially prevalent with killers who slug a lot, which again, twins falls in that category. This would hopefully give a slight quality of life boost to solo queue and allow for a lesser chance of getting killers like this that are much more arduous to play against with solo queue teammates. To be clear, this would not operate as an outright ban on the killers selected. Instead, the matchmaking would just take a little bit longer to find a different lobby or killer. One additional note about this kind of feature is that it would not work on new killers that were just released within the last major patch or two. This is obviously to allow players time to not only play the newest killer and not have everyone dodge it, but also allow survivors time to play against a new killer and learn the ins and outs and what to do, what not to do, before just making an outright judgment on saying a killer is too OP or too unfun to play against. You could also implement this kind of feature for killers who receive major reworks of some kind, but I'm not entirely sure if that would fall in the same category as a new killer necessarily. And I believe that's about it for any major wishlist items for fixing solo queue. Let me know if there's anything I left off of this wish list for fixing solo queue that maybe is potentially major and I am crazy for not thinking of it. I try to think of some things that are not just more aura reading or something else that is kind of just the same thing, but just in a perk that already exists. Like base kit Kindred sounds nice in theory, but I can't tell you how many times I've played with survivors in solo queue who have Kindred, but they still don't utilize it the way they should. Aura reading is just overrated on the survivor side of things, I think, because truthfully, a killer can have a strong enough power that it doesn't matter if you can see their aura, they're just going to be able to snowball quickly or something, so. But that's all I have for now, so I wish you luck if you play solo queue, and thanks for watching.